Getting that big sound. We're still talking about sound in today's video, a very important aspect of our playing. Let's get to it. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rybicki. I'm Matt Rybicki. Thanks for joining me today. We're continuing to talk about bass sound, and today we're going to talk about things that have to do with how we play the instrument as opposed to where we set up and the other things we discussed in the earlier video. The first thing I want to talk about today is your right hand. Now there's a variety of sounds that you can get out of the instrument with your right hand, depending on where you put it and which fingers you use and so on. But today we're just talking about getting a loud, big, fat sound. So we're going to focus on that as opposed to the other ways that you can use your right hand. So when we're talking about playing the actual strings with our hand, we want to get as much meat of the finger on the string as possible. That's going to help a lot with the overall sound. For example, if I approach the bass like this with my hands sort of perpendicular to the strings, like an electric player might, I can get a sound. But there's only so much volume I can get out of the bass this way. Part of the reason we are held back by this technique this way is that we can't really use the gravity that works for us all the time. The weight of our arm falling down, we're resisting that the whole time with our hand this way. So what we want to try to do is approach the bass in such a way that our finger is more parallel to the string, thereby getting much more of the skin of the finger on the string. Now I spoke about the variety of sounds we can get depending on where we put our hand. Here we're going to focus on an exercise that has to do with putting our finger right at the end of the fingerboard and leaving it there and practicing with it there. In short, when your hand is closer to the bridge at the end of the fingerboard, you're going to get a more percussive and louder, volume-wise, a louder sound. As opposed to, so we want to keep our finger at the end of the fingerboard. To that end, it is extremely helpful, I mean very, very helpful, if you are able to practice these exercises having to do with sound in front of a mirror. Really, really, really important to watch yourself in a mirror as you make sure that your finger stays at the end of the fingerboard. The master Ron Carter talks about a little tip that's going to help us keep our hand in the right place besides just looking in a mirror. That's to take a piece of Velcro, I've got sort of a long one here, and cut it into a little strip. Take that little strip and place it on the edge of your fingerboard here to remind you to not move your thumb above that spot. So it's going to have a tactile sensation that's going to remind you, oh, my hand is too high. I want to keep it below there. We judge where our thumb is based on where it lays when our finger is at the end of the fingerboard. So I see my finger at the end of the fingerboard here. My thumb ends up sort of in this spot on the edge of the fingerboard, and so I would mark that with the Velcro. So this is a really dumb and boring exercise. However, it can yield great results. And that is set a metronome at a moderate tempo, look in a mirror, check where your hand is, play open strings. Now notice when you're doing this exercise, as always when playing the E string, you need to have sort of a turning a door knob motion, turning a doorknob motion. So you need to sort of turn your finger off the string entirely to get out of the way so that it can continue to shake, vibrate. So my thumb is still on the edge of the fingerboard, but my finger is off as I strike the string and let it ring. Now, when you're doing this exercise, just don't keep it at one tempo. I'm thinking about the fact that, yes, it's not the prettiest sound in the world, but I'm training my muscles to work in such a way that the default for your hand ends up in a much bigger sounding place. It doesn't necessarily have to end up at the end of the fingerboard in the way you ultimately play. In fact, my hand tends to be a little bit higher, and that's okay. I've worked on this, so I know what works for me. The important thing is to put those reps in, so that you really understand what your muscles need to do to get that sound and how much effort you need to exert. And I am putting effort in here. I am using my muscles. The thing is, I'm also using the weight of my arm falling to the ground and the weight of my shoulder to make the sound. In fact, when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about the energy, so to speak, coming from the ground up through my leg, through my back, through my shoulder, and all coming to this single point. It's all directed to this single point. However, all the parts are still involved while you're directing the energy here. That doesn't mean that you're bearing down and tensing your muscles. It's rather that all the strength does not come from just this one finger, just this one joint. The strength does not come from here. It comes from all this, the entire system. So, while you're using this experiment, this exercise, to try and get the bigger sound that you want, experiment too with the way that this finger interacts with the string in relation to where your palm is and the shape of your hand. What I mean is, if I am very parallel to the string like this, I'm perfectly parallel and my full finger is on the G string, for example, my hand has to be quite awkwardly turned and shifted, doesn't it? It's kind of got this bend in the wrist there that isn't so great. Eventually, you'll find that you're going to have to turn your hand slightly at more of an angle. You can't be really quite parallel on the G string and stay anchored to the side of the fingerboard here with your thumb. So you're going to have to come at a bit of an angle as opposed to perfectly parallel with the string. That's okay. When you are putting yourself through the reps of doing this harder thing, it will teach you where the easier thing can be effective and still sound really good. Also, as you're thinking about your finger being parallel here, experiment with letting your finger and hand sort of float on the string as opposed to sort of pulling through the string. Come sort of more on top of it and let your finger fall to the next string, as we always do in this Pitts technique. But what you want to do is sort of just, you're kind of approaching it from more on top of the string as opposed to through the string. As I do this, I realize I'm doing a Ray Brown thing here, which is he sometimes put his pinky out as a sort of counterbalance to this, especially when playing fast. It can work. Back to the main point there, I'm letting my finger, again, be sort of on top of the string instead of through the string. So this is sort of through the string, what I mean. I'm ending up touching the fingerboard with my right finger as I strike and let go. I'm touching the fingerboard. But here, I'm really touching it a lot less. I'm really having the next string end my stroke, so to speak. As opposed to I found this really effective when I want to try and change the timbre of a louder sound. In other words, it can make it slightly less aggressive or sort of strident, for lack of a better word in my mind right now, to be on top of it. It's a sort of a bit more warmth, which you can get by moving your hand up, but you don't have that same volume. So again, as you're doing these exercises that can be very boring, as I said at the beginning, what you discover is that there's actually a lot of very, very minute details that you can pay attention to and adjust to get the sound that you're looking for. Another thing that may be a little unusual that can help with the overall volume of the bass, and this kind of straddles the line between the other video I was talking about too, was something that the great luthier David Gage hit me to, and I don't know where he learned it, but the idea is that by playing with the bow and playing two notes simultaneously, a double stop that is very dissonant, you're going to cause the bass to really, really vibrate. You're going to cause the wood to vibrate because of that dissonance. So for example, if I play the open E string and a B flat on the A string, which is called a tritone, the interval of a tritone, it's generally considered a pretty dissonant interval, the bass is going to vibrate because of that. If I do the A, open A, and the E flat on the D string, it may not be apparent on the video or in the sound, but I can actually feel the bass moving against me. I can feel the vibration of the wood. The idea is you're sort of opening the bass up this way. You're allowing it to sort of breathe and to move as it should. So you're forcing it to sort of get out of its tight spot and making it move in places that might not normally move, because we don't usually play those two intervals together. If I do the D and the G string, D and the A flat on the G string, so this is basically taking the idea of long tones to another level. And you'll notice too that I have sort of slightly adjusted as I'm playing to move my bow closer to the bridge, which is also, like our finger, gonna make it a sharper, louder sound. So it's again, these are not pretty exercises, but they're sort of workout. It's lifting weights, so to speak. And in this one, we're sort of lifting weights for our bass. Let me do it one more time. Really got to exert a lot of strength for this. And you can certainly play these closed as well. If I play B flat and E here. Again, I'm really feeling the instrument vibrate against my body. It's really powerful. And if you do it for a long time, meaning more than a few minutes, you will actually notice that your bass is going to sort of open up in sound. This is a neat little trick that I learned that I found to be pretty effective. The last thing I want to talk about has to do with our left hand. And yes, the left hand does have to do with our sound and how big and wonderful it is, or is it? Proper technique isn't just rules for rules' sake. Technique has to do with getting around the instrument and also being able to produce a nice sound. So when we talk about the left hand, we often talk about trying to get on the tips of our fingers, our fingertips, right onto the string. And that sort of makes our hand have this C shape we've discussed. And when we have this approach, when we're coming down on the string like this, the sound is very, very clear. That's going to help with, again, that sense of clarity and command we talked about in the other video, confidence, and also being heard by others. If your note is very clear, you will be heard by others. Additionally, if you are exerting the right amount of pressure, now mind you, I'm not saying squeezing very hard, I just mean exerting the proper amount of pressure. If you are doing so, that's going to help the string to vibrate in its full sort of motion, as opposed to if I don't fully press down, right? This isn't a strong example where I'm not even pressing the note down at all. I certainly get no ringing, right? And if I sort of press down, I get a buzz and so on and so forth. But if I'm really exerting the proper amount of pressure, did you notice I just squeezed a little harder there? I'm squeezing as hard as I can now. I'm at least loosening up. I squeezed really hard there. You want to be careful when squeezing really hard. You don't want to hurt your hand. But there is a benefit, again, in experimenting with how much pressure can I exert without tiring myself or hurting myself. To help in this, think about the fact that the weight of this arm will also aid in exerting pressure on the string itself. It's not strictly this way into the string. It's sort of coming down to your body. You're letting the gravity and the weight of your arm fall, and that's also helping your finger be interactive with the string itself. Right? This last one I didn't get so well. Did you hear that I sort of missed it a little bit? It wasn't the full, I wasn't pressing down quite enough. So that was a great little mistake example of what can happen when you don't put your left hand down in the proper way. Hopefully these tips have been helpful. Thanks for joining me today for Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rybicki. Please do like and subscribe for more info and more videos in your inbox, hot and fresh every week. Remember, straight ahead, strive for tone. Thanks for watching.